Welcome back to our Premiere Pro Quick Start lesson. We're going to be talking about some really advanced concepts in the next couple of lessons, so let's just jump right into it. The first one of the things that we're going to talk about is troubleshooting. When you're editing, your chances of running into trouble are pretty high, and oftentimes you'll come across some issues or an error message that you're not really sure how to deal with. And I want to talk to you about one of the ways that's going to help you clean things up in Premiere just in case you run into some of these problems. And again, the problems could relate to your timeline. They could be having to do with the footage that you're using. They could have to do with the configuration of your computer. This is not a catch-all solve. This is just one thing you can do to try to keep things clean and organized on your machine to prevent certain errors from occurring. So this is all about clearing the media cache. Let me open up our preferences here, Premiere Pro, Preferences, and we're going to open up the media cache. And we mentioned earlier on that we were going to talk about this later, and this is that time. So if you look here, this is the preferences window for the media cache. Now, essentially what the media cache does is when you import your files, Premiere writes a small file on your computer or wherever you designate that tells Premiere how to quickly access the information in your file. Occasionally, while Premiere is busy doing that work, it can get stuck and it can create a file that's unusable or creates problems. And one of the ways to make sure that your system is running optimally is to clear your media cache regularly, just in case you have some files that get stuck in there. Now, there are some ways that Premiere will help you manage this. One of them is that you can have it set to do not delete the cache files automatically. But if you want to try to keep Premiere more clean and a little more organized in the back end of things, you can tell Premiere when to automatically clear cache files. So you can say every 3 months or 90 days, or when your cache exceeds 100 gigabytes or some value that you choose to determine here. Now, I personally like to clear this out manually, and I'm going to show you how to go about doing that process. So the first thing you can do if you want to manually clear the media cache is come up here to the delete unused. And what's going to happen is Premiere is going to find all the cache files that you are not currently using or have not recently been used, and it's going to go ahead and delete them. Let me just go ahead and click that now. And it did it. Now, the thing is, before I started recording this tutorial, I already did this. So this went really quickly. I want to show you how to actually get to that point in your computer so that you can actually see where these cache files are stored. So you can see that it's given us a destination, users, my name, and then library, application support, Adobe, and common. Let's go to this location on our computer. I'm going to click on Finder. I'm going to go up to the Finder, File, New Finder window. And if I go to the Go here, I can hold Go and hold Option to reveal the library. There's the library. And we're going to Application Support, up to Adobe, down to Common, and here we have a bunch of important files that Adobe uses to help its programs run more efficiently. Now, if you were on a PC, you can find that default location on your local drive under Users, then your user name. In this folder here, you'll need to make sure that Hidden Items is checked so you can see the App Data folder. Next, you'll navigate to Roaming, then Adobe, and down to Common, where you'll then find the media cache. One of them is the media cache, another one is the media cache files, and the last one is the peak files. Now, essentially what's happening when you click the delete unused or use any of the automatic settings to delete these things, let me just move this over here so we can see it better, is if you choose one of these two options, every 90 days, any files in media cache or media cache files that are older than 90 days will get removed. So if you have a project from 3 months ago that you're no longer using, the cache files from that project will be removed in 90 days. But if you have a project that you're currently working on and maybe it's a year-long project, you might not want to choose this option because it will go ahead and delete your cache files because they've been in there for 90 days. So you may choose to say instead that you don't want this folder on your computer to exceed a size of 100 gigabytes. And so you can choose this number or a lower number if you have a smaller hard drive in your machine. But if you want to just manually clear this folder out, you can go ahead and do that. Go into the media cache, open it up, and this is empty right now because we did delete unused, or into the media cache files. And here's a bunch of media cache files that have been created while making this tutorial. So some of these we can actually see here, some audio tracks from Alibi that we downloaded. I've got Film Editing Pro right here. So this is a bunch of files that we're using in our project now that have been given some crazy code and a file extension. I can go ahead and I can just select everything here and right click and just move it to the trash. But because we're in the middle of working on this project, I'm not going to do that. It won't damage anything. It'll just have to rebuild them once we go back into Premiere. And it'll do that pretty quickly, and oftentimes it does that in the background, so you won't notice it. But if you have a huge project, like a large documentary or something like that, you might want to be cautious of when you do this, unless, of course, you're running into problems with your machine. Let me go back up here. There's also the peak files. Now, something that may occur while you're working is that you have these audio files down here in your timeline. Let me just show you here. And they all have these waveforms on them. And this is really helpful, as you know, from doing the music scoring and some of the sound effects to see where those waveforms occur. But those waveforms have to be generated and written onto the file in order for Premiere to display them. That's where peak files come in. Peak files are what Premiere generates so that it can display the waveforms of your audio in your timeline and in the source monitor. And occasionally what might happen is Premiere will be making all of these different peak files, drawing out the waveforms, and it'll get stuck somewhere along the way. And so one of the ways to clear out peak files, where one of them may actually be a problem, is to hop back into this folder here, go into the peak files, and just select everything, and we can move this to the trash as well. One thing to note, it's common practice for most editors to store their media cache on an external SSD drive, something that's fast, that's connected to your computer all the time. This takes the load off of the hard drive inside of your computer from having to do too much work while you're actually editing. And so you want to try to keep these media cache files in a place that's very optimal to be quickly accessed and quickly read and written. So if you run into any problems with Premiere that you think are bizarre or a little unexplainable, first things first, try to clear out your media cache and see if that solves them. This lesson is going to have some homework. First, set up your media cache preferences based on the type of projects you plan to do. Next, familiarize yourself with the location of the media cache on your own system. Coming up in the next lesson, we're going to talk about the power of the match frame tool.